Hi there, today we're making this little twisted pendant. And if you enjoy this video, why not subscribe for more like it? Now let's get twisting. For this project, we're using 1.6mm diameter copper wire, which is 14 gauge, 0.6mm diameter copper wire, which is 22 gauge, a jump ring, and a 6mm bead. We have several choices here because I asked you what you wanted to see. And I'm afraid this project is a little bit heavy on the tools, so we need chain or flat nose pliers, wire cutters, a wire twisting tool, I've got the twisting pliers here, a torch, hammer and block, file and polishing tools, and then depending on how we make this project, a mandrel, bail making pliers and soldering tools. So let's start by twisting the wire. And I'm going to cut about 14 inches or about 38 centimetres of the 1.6mm 14 gauge wire. This will be enough to make a few pendants. Then we can bend that in half. And in order to attach it to the twisting pliers, we need to secure those two ends together. So I'm just going to hold them in my flat nose pliers and give that a bit of a twist. This doesn't need to be too tight because it's only temporary. And I found the best way to secure it in these twisting pliers is to have it sitting in that hole in the pliers. So we can bend the ends over and then open the pliers and position that wire. Then we'll lock the pliers in place and the wire's held. And as you can see, I've got about 5.5 inches there protruding from the pliers, which is just a little less than 14 centimetres. And I'll measure again the twisted wire to show you how much you need for the twist. And I'm going to secure the loop on my coiling gizmo. You could use another anchor point, just as long as it's fairly solid. And you could use a different twisting tool, but for this thickness of wire, if I didn't have these pliers, I'd probably use a drill. And then all we need to do is pull the end of the pliers to get that twist in place, and then hold the pliers and release the end. And we'll continue with this until we get the twist we want. And incidentally, this project's also really good for leftover pieces of wire. Now I think that's about twisted enough. I want it to be fairly tight, but still open up slightly when we hammer it. And if I show you now, the total length's about 5 inches and the twist itself is about 4 3/4, which is about 11.5 centimetres for the twist and 13 centimetres in total. So let's release the pliers and take that wire out. And then we can undo the ends we twisted together. And what we will do with these is bend them around to create a space for the bead. So I'll just give them a quick rough shape at the moment so you can see where this is going. Now once we have shaped these later, we're going to solder the ends together. So if you don't want to use solder, you could use the other end instead. And we now need to decide how long we want the pendant to be. I think I want it to be finished about here. So we need to go down a couple of twists, and that's where we're going to cut the wire. And if you've got an off-cut of twisted wire, this is where you can begin to shape the pendant. The first thing we're going to do is fuse those wire ends together, and for this we're going to use a torch. Now, because the wire is quite thick, this small torch doesn't bring out enough heat for me, so I'm going to use its bigger brother, which attaches directly to the butane. If you've only got a small torch, it's worth a try, but you might need to experiment with where you're holding the piece and the angle that you're holding it and heating it at, and it may well take a little bit longer. So I'm going to use my reverse action tweezers to hold the piece, and we can either hold it at an angle to a horizontal flame or vertically above a vertical flame. I'll give both of them a try here. So let's get the torch on and see if we can get those twisted wires fused and balled together. And for more details on this technique, it might be worth looking at my How to Make Your Own Head Pins video. I'll link that in a card above and in the description below. And please take adequate precautions when you're working with flame, keeping flammable items out of the way, work in a ventilated area, and wear eye protection. And we just want to hold the tips of the wire at the point of that cone. And they're getting to the point where they're glowing really brightly, but it just won't quite fuse. So I think I'll turn the flame. This does tend to get the piece hotter. And you can just see the end balling up. When it goes, it does go quite quickly, so you do need to watch for it and then move the flame away. And as you can see, the ends are fused together into a little ball. So I'll cool that and pickle it so we're working quite clean. Now, because we heated the wires whilst we were balling that end, we've annealed the wires and they're now nice and soft. So we can easily shape that end how we want it. And we're looking for a fairly rounded base, so the bead sits in quite low. And then coming up to a bit more of a point at the top. And we can just keep playing with this shape until we're happy with it and it looks fairly symmetrical. I think I'm quite happy with that shape, and we can ignore the very ends because we're going to trim those to quite close to where they cross. So let's do that now. And you can make these a little bit longer if you want. And I just want to make them fairly even. Now, if we're using the other end, we've got that closed loop, but we can still work carefully to change the shape of it, rounding the base, and just put a gentle point at the top. And incidentally, if you've got a piece of wire that's fully twisted, you can use it. This is the piece I had left over from twisting at the start. I've fused the end, and this has softened the wire up enough to be able to gently untwist the wires at the other end. Straighten them out, and nylon jaw pliers are really useful for this. And then curve them into shape. And I forgot to use them before, but as you can see, your bell making pliers, if you've got them, can be used to help with making this shape. Now, whichever piece you've made, it's ready to start hammering. And we're going to start at that fused end and just gently hammer it until it's as flat and wide as you like it. like to turn my pieces intermittently as I go, so I can just kind of check that it's even both sides. Then when we're happy with that fused end, we can start working our way up the twist. And the twist will open out a little bit at this point if it's not too tightly twisted. And I like that as a design feature. Then we can turn the piece to hammer the top of that twist. And then finally we'll hammer that loop. And you want to take care here that it doesn't open out and change where it's crossed over. Now we're ready for the soldering. Now where we're soldering is clean from the pickle and the two edges are close together from the hammering. So we just need to paint on some flux, and I'm using some borax. Place our piece of solder. And then gently heat the piece. And the general idea is that we're heating the metal, which in turn will heat the solder. We're not trying to heat that solder directly. And once we've got up to the right temperature, that solder will melt and hopefully flow into the join. Now solder does tend to flow towards the heat, so you can use that a bit to your advantage if you need to move it around. And that looks to have soldered together okay, so we can let this cool and then pickle it to clean it up again. Then we can file those wire ends just to round them off a bit and make sure there's no burrs that are going to catch. And then we can also use the file on the balled end just to make sure that's the shape that we want it. I'm going for a nice even round end. And then we're ready to start polishing. And if you've got a bit of excess solder, I find these little rubber burrs can clean that up really nicely. And they're also great for the first stage of polishing. But you can use whichever polishing tools you've got. And you can take it to whatever finish you like. I'm going for quite a high shine here. So I'll work towards finer grits. And I really like these 3M polishing discs. So that's our pendant all polished up. And we're ready to add the bead. Now I wasn't sure which bead to use for this project, so I asked you, and thank you so much to everybody who responded, and I can now reveal the results. In fourth place, with 13% of the vote, was the black agate. In third place, with 19% of the vote, was the rose quartz. And in second place, with 30% of the vote, was the blue jasper. So our winner is the red fire agate, with 38% of the vote. Now because it was fairly close, I think I'll use that blue jasper in the closed loop pendant to show you how that looks. I love this fire agate, but as you can see I've still got plenty of choice in terms of which bead I choose. I don't think I want one that's very white, but it'd be nice to have some of that crackle in it. And because I'm going to oxidise the piece, I'll check these beads up against an already oxidised piece. I quite like that bead, but it seems a little dull. This one seems a lot brighter. So I think that's the one I'm going to go for. And what we're looking for is the bead to sit around about here. As you can see, it's just got a little bit of clearance around the edge. And then we've got that space at the top for the jump ring. So I've got about 15 centimetres of the 0.6mm or 22 gauge wire. And I'm just going to hold it at the back of the pendant Then thread it through the loop and just wind that wire around the side. Just want to make sure that it's sitting close to where that loop begins. And we'll just coil up the side to where we want to add the bead. And we can check as we go. I think I need another couple of coils there. Then thread on the bead. And take that wire over to the other side. Then we want to take that wire end through under where the bead comes across. Make sure the bead's sitting where you want it and that wire's nice and tight going through the bead. Then we can continue threading that wire through and coiling down the other side of the pendant. And if we put the same number of coils on each side, that'll keep everything looking even. We might just need our pliers to help at the end there. Then we can trim off those wire ends. And make sure they're sitting flush with the pendant and won't catch. Then all we need to do is add the jump ring to the top to hang the pendant with. And the pendant's finished. Now we could leave this that bright copper, but I will patina it. And I thought at this point it was worth showing you what the blue bead looks like in the other pendant, both in bright copper and patinaed. And here's our finished pendant. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, why not head to this playlist for more twists, coils and plaits. Thanks for watching and I'll see you soon.